Hello, you're watching John Nicholson and this is my YouTube channel. Let's talk about Ukraine. Donald Trump is meeting Vladimir Putin in Alaska, which is in Russia. Donald Trump thinks, I don't know if you saw the clip, where he said, I'm flying to Russia to talk to Vladimir Putin. Of course, Alaska was part of Russia until the mid-1860s, I think it was 1866 or thereabouts. It was sold by Russia to the United States, and it's been part of the United States ever since. And Donald Trump, woefully ignorant about history, culture and much else, apparently wasn't aware of that. Can you imagine if you're an American living in Alaska and your president thinks that your state is part of Russia? How woefully stupid is that? But that's a side issue. The main issue is he's flying to talk to Vladimir Putin about the future of Ukraine. Now, you'd think the Ukrainians might have been invited to talk about Ukraine, but no, it's Donald Trump and Putin discussing the future of an independent, sovereign state. And you can imagine how that must feel to the Ukrainians, that the fact that they've been excluded from this conversation. Now, if you remember the election campaign, Donald Trump said that he would resolve this issue on day one. That was his pledge. On day one, he would resolve this war. And here we are, 6 months or more in, and the death toll continues to multiply as Putin carries on his barbaric war against the people of Ukraine, who did nothing to deserve his attack. Obviously, like everybody else, I'm hoping that the talks go well, but it strikes me that Donald Trump, with his history of enthusiasm for dictators, and with a stark memory of the appalling way that he treated the Ukrainian president during his visit to the White House, you've got to be concerned that Donald Trump is the man who has set himself up to negotiate a peace treaty. I was just looking at some of the figures so far. The figures are that 1 million Russians have so far been killed in this war. Now, they're mostly poor Russians. They're obviously young male Russians from poorer parts of Russia. They're lured from their villages with the offer of 25 or 30,000 pounds, an enormous amount of money in Russia, in order to volunteer. That is their reward for volunteering, and for many of them that's a life-changing amount of money. And because of the propaganda in the Russian media, they have no idea that they are heading towards killing fields in Ukraine. Roughly 15 times more Russians have now been killed in the Ukraine war than in the Afghanistan war. And the Afghanistan war lives on in Russian memories as a terrible bloodbath. And I don't think the Russians know at the moment just how many of their fellow citizens have been killed in this. 50,000 civilians have been killed in Ukraine with Russian bombardment. Now, what is the answer to this conflict? Well, Donald Trump has said so far that he thinks there's an obvious answer, which is a land swap. But what Putin means by a land swap, what he said so far, is that the Ukrainians should swap some land that they've lost already to the Russians for land that they haven't lost so far to the Russians. In other words, his proposal is that Ukrainians should swap some of their own land for some of their own land. Now, obviously, Ukrainians are never going to give in to this. And even if there was a ceasefire, even if there was an agreement of sorts, Putin is never going to respect that agreement. The current borders of Ukraine were guaranteed by Russia in an international treaty. So Russia initially agreed that the borders of Ukraine, the current borders of Ukraine, should never be altered, and certainly never be altered by force. And what people in the European Union are saying to Donald Trump and to Putin is that we cannot reward military aggression. Now, one of the idiots in the administration, the American administration, was saying that the only land that would be lost would be land that was lost on the battlefield. We cannot possibly agree to that. The whole point of the post-World War II order in Europe is that military might cannot be rewarded. You can't invade another country and then be allowed to keep some of that country's land. It would cause a collapse in the world order. And what would happen next? If Putin's successful there, he would then start thinking, well, you know what, I could probably get a bit of Estonia, maybe I get a bit of Lithuania as well. He will not stop. We have to stop him. And that's why it's so crucial that we in Europe allow, certainly in the medium long term, Ukraine to join NATO, Ukraine to join the European Union. Ukraine has applied to both organisations for membership. And we must never ever concede the right of any country to increase its territory through violent means. So I am unapologetically on the side of the Ukrainians. I'm strongly supportive of NATO. An independent Scotland, I believe, should be in NATO. We face a real existentialist threat from Vladimir Putin in Europe. Certainly the Baltic states feel that very keenly. So while I'm rooting for a peace process, I hope at the end of the day we'll see Vladimir Putin in The Hague charged with war crimes, not least the murders of Ukrainian civilians and the needless loss of 1 million young Russian men. Please let me know your thoughts. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel below, and you can also leave your comments. Subscribing doesn't cost anything, and I always look forward to hearing what you have to say. And thank you for watching.